So we'll start out here. How many of you are familiar with this graphic from Smarter Balanced? Good, that's great. Well, it's intended to represent, and I don't have my little pointer here, off to the left, right, the whole assessment system is based on the Common Core standards. And then the three prongs of the assessment system are the summative one, which is in yellow up on the top. So that's the end of the year, right, test that was field tested last year, end of year, quote, in quotes, right? And that will be put into operations this spring. So that's the one, the window opens up on March 10th for those schools and districts that their window opens up then. It'll start March 10th. That one is going to be used for accountability, right, for the end of the year accountability. And it will provide information to teachers to help them improve the programs in general and also provide services to students. But that information comes a little bit later. That's, it's not as late as the CST. We'll get it earlier than we did before. And teachers will have access to individual student reports. Within 4 weeks, that's when the reports are supposed to be available electronically to teachers after the summative assessment comes. So that's way, way better than the CST was. So that's the first part of it. Then the second part are the interim assessments. And those are intended, those were designed to provide information during the year to teachers and students to help improve teaching and learning. Those are not tests that can serve all purposes. They're intended to be a part of your local assessment system, and we'll talk about that in the middle part of our work today. And then the last part is the formative resources, and that's the digital library. So all three of those assessment pieces inform teachers, right? And then the middle part, the aqua part, the information and tools they're referring to there are the curriculum materials, right? Teacher professional development, all of that. And then magically, all students leave high school, college, and career ready if you use all of the pieces of the system, right?
Sure.
You're eating. It's okay. You don't have to laugh. So I want to talk a little bit about the adaptive part of the system. So the way it's going to work is that it will be selecting based on student responses, right? How many of you are familiar with the way adaptive tests work? Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on this one. The interesting thing to me is that students will be answering questions. I was intrigued by this bullet that they gave me, right? They'll answer half the questions correctly and half of them incorrectly. But it kind of makes sense if you think about an adaptive test, right? If I answer it incorrectly, then it's going to go down. Then I'll answer another one correctly, and it gives me another something. So if you think of adaptive in terms of what it does for the students, it kind of makes sense. They're going to be scored both on the number of correct answers and also on the robustness of the question itself. So those two things will be brought to bear. Is that too low for you to see up there? I'm sorry. So I'll read that to you. Student is scored on both the number of correct answers and the difficulty of the questions completed. And then the bottom bullet says performance tasks, PT for ELA and mathematics are not computer adaptive, but they are taken on the computer. So that's just a little information piece. Question. Please ask me questions anytime you want. I'm very comfortable.
On the adaptive within the strands, how far down will it go? Like if I have a high school student, for example, and the high school standards are pretty rigorous. And they're taking their test in 11th grade.
Right.
So
right.
When they take those, all of those are high school standards. Will it drop them down to like 8th grade level, 7th grade level when it goes adaptive, or is it just easier questions within those standards?
It's easier questions within that standard, yeah. My understanding is that it stays at the grade level. It's the difficulty of the question itself.
For say a high school student that's a junior that struggled and only got through the first year of math,
right.
It's not really going to adapt to their level necessarily of understanding.
Right.
So
I don't really know. Here's what I will say to you. I think we're getting a lot of questions about that from the field. And that's part of interpreting, that's part of the information that needs to be provided to teachers and parents about the test and also about the results. So we will be preparing something for you that is a really good layperson's translation of how that test works. And I would just say we don't have that resource yet, but we're working on it, yeah. Because that is a really good question. We've got, I think, a lot of teachers, that we have a special ed person here,
well, I teach,
right?
You teach. I co-teach.
Okay,
I teach
there you go.
I co-teach, so
okay.
About half my students are special ed.
Okay.
That are
Yeah, because if I'm a 4th grade student but I'm reading at the 2nd grade level, then what does that mean for me when I'm testing? Yes, you have a question?
The blueprints indicate a number of items per claim. How does the computer adaptive part fit in with the blueprints? When they hit that number, does it stop? Whether they get them correct or incorrect, or
The way
higher or lower?
the way it's explained to me is that, okay, so the blueprint says they will get X number of questions on the test, right? But there is a limit, you know, the test doesn't go off forever. In other words, it does have a limit where it shows that the student has mastered or has demonstrated mastery of that particular concept. So if the kid hits that, it's not going to keep giving them more questions about that. It's going to stop for that particular thing and move on. And that's what I know about that. That didn't answer your question, did it? Ask it again. Let me try again. Try again.
So if there are 7 questions on that particular claim,
Yes,
a student gets 7 questions, answers them all correct, they're done?
that
Do
would,
they answer 5 correct and then they're done?
they might answer only 5 correct and then they're done.
So
Yeah,
they would have received
Yeah.
7 total.
yeah. My question about that is whether the summative is the fixed form test. Do you know what I mean? You can't really, I don't think you can really say how many questions there are going to be because the kids are different. They're going to be answering them differently. So that goes back to, I think we need more information about that adaptive testing down to the grade level questions. You know, how far down is it going to go for kids if they can't answer? Because I was told it stayed just within the grade level that's being tested. So, but I would like to have that in paper, on paper somewhere, right, that we can look at it and everybody can quote it. Okay, so I'm going to move on here to the next slide. Oh, it works now. My little wireless thing is working now. This is good. This slide is offered for you to be able to share with anybody that you need to communicate the benefits of going to this adaptive kind of test. If you need to explain it to anybody, you know, that the turnaround is faster and that there should be fewer questions, right? If the kid can demonstrate that they understand, they will get fewer questions. The big thing about the summative test that I hope you're all excited about, I'm really excited about it, is that with the CST, do you remember we could not compare students from year to year to year? I mean, everybody did, but you couldn't. It was silly, really, to use those scores from year to year. This test, though, is designed so that we can measure growth from year to year to year. There will be a scale, and the kids will move along that scale, and we will be able to show growth over time. So this is a really important part of the new test. I like also this greater security. Larger item banks mean that not all students receive the same questions. That's good. And it's mature technology. They know what they're doing. I'm offering this as one of the handouts, as Robin said, in the Dropbox folder. So this is a graphic that we built last year intended to really break apart the different areas of work that are related to preparing originally for the field test and now for the summative assessment. So on the left-hand side, it's the work that is involved in getting the student information accurately into CalPads, because CalPads is the source, right, of student data, their name, their grade level, all of those things. If their grade level is not right, it's hugely important, because they won't get the right test, literally. They will not be able to get the right test. And I know that seems, you know, really small to pay attention to, but if you've got a classroom of teachers and 2 of those kids are at the wrong grade level, you can't start the testing with them that day, and it takes about 24 hours to get it corrected in CalPads, so then you've got to deal with 2 kids that can't be tested along with the rest of their class. So it's hugely important. So the blue part is getting the kids into TOMS. It's also getting the teachers registered to be, or whoever is going to be your test administrators. How many of you are responsible for this part of it, the test administration? Not very many, okay. But that part, essentially students, teachers, and this part you should all care about. It's also making sure that the test settings for the students are accurate. So we have this year universal tools, designated supports and accommodations that can be given to the students. Are you all familiar with those 3 types of test settings? And so getting the test settings into the computer well ahead of when the students are testing and use the practice test. I'll probably say this more than once. Use the practice test to make sure that those test settings are working is also a really critical thing to take care of this year. Off to the right then, the green part, is all about student and teacher preparation. So that's really about, helping teachers understand the differences between this test and the previous test. There's still an awful lot of teachers out there that have not looked at the items in the practice test. And it's really an eye-opener, or that really didn't look at what the kids were looking at during the field test, because the types of questions are very different from the ones that they got on the CST. They'll have some that are the same as on the CST, but they'll also have test questions that will offer 2 correct answers, right? So students need to know that those things are on there and how to address them, and they need to know how to use the tools, to be able to answer the question, like the graphing pieces and the calculators that are in there, all of those things they need to become familiar with. And the best way to make sure that that happens is to make sure that the teachers are aware of the different kinds of items that are in there. Does that make sense to all of you? How many of you would agree? Oh, hello. Is this better?
Yes.
Well, we were talking about the teacher side over there, student-teacher preparation. And then the bottom is the secure browser and the devices, just making sure that the devices are in place and the browser's loaded and all of that. So I'm so happy that the department decided to do the field test for everybody last year. I think it was just so smart to do that. So what I would offer you then, this particular graphic, I can give that to you. I gave you a PDF because it prints better, but if anybody wants it in a Word file, I'll send that to Robin. And if you, some districts that I've worked with have put names of people in for actually who's doing what, just to kind of communicate. Our original purpose was to reassure teachers that they didn't have to do everything, because they were really worried about a lot of the stuff. But if you want to use that, you're welcome to. The preparation, so just to remind you that if your CAS coordinator has not been through the training, there are archived webcasts on cas.org that walk people through all of the things that need to do, to ensure that the site is prepared for the summative assessment. So I've just put that slide in there as a reminder. And then to talk again about the universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations. There are 2 different kinds, right? The embedded and the non-embedded accessibility supports. So the embedded ones are the ones that are in the computer. The digital notepad, like the calculator, for example. If you have a kid who is used to using a calculator in the classroom, get them on the practice test, make sure that they are able to use that calculator, and if not, particularly there are special ed kids, if they can't use the one that's on the calculator, then they can have that non-embedded support, which would mean they could use the calculator that they're used to using in the classroom. Some kids have talking calculators, for example, those kinds of things. So it's important to take a look at individual students. This graph shows all of the different accessibility supports that are available. And I'm bringing it up, if you notice under Universal Tools, the blue, those are tools that are available for all students. Those are turned on in the system, right, as a default. They will show up there no matter what. So if you look at the upper left hand where it says embedded, and you notice there's a tool called Zoom, so you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. There's also a designated support down at the bottom that says turn off any universal tools. Do you see that one? So if you have a student who's going to be distracted by any of those tools, this is my brother Tim many years ago. His teacher would never have left Zoom on for Tim because he would have spent a lot of time playing with that, right? So they would have turned it off for him. So I just wanted you to be aware that that is an option. If the tools that are built in are something that does not benefit the student, you can turn off an individual tool. Okay? Then the designated supports, the embedded ones, the color contrast, masking, those kids need to learn if they've been assigned those, how does that work? How do, I have to click on masking, I have to draw it. If I want it to go away, I don't just close it, I also have to turn the tool off. So they need a little bit of practice ahead of time to be able to use these fluently during the test. Yes?
So I know it says it up there, but just to clarify, this paper, scratch paper is only available in the non-embedded.
Scratch paper it's provided by the district or the school. It's available to everybody. And there are some, I'm thinking like there's graph paper that you'd have to look at the list. It's in the test administrator's manual, but I think 6th grade and up, graph paper is to be provided to the kids, but you can always give them scratch paper. You have to collect it. You have to collect it at the end and dispose of it. And the other question I get around that scratch paper is on the practice test part, not the practice test part, the performance task part. So the English language arts is long, right? It's typically taken in 2 pieces. The students may write on scratch paper. You can collect it and then give it back to them when they come back and finish it. It's permitted to do that as well. You just treat it as a secure material. Does that make sense? Okay. Question?
Am I reading this correctly, that the calculator is an embedded universal tool that all students can use?
On some items, there are some items within tests at each grade level where the calculator, and it's a different calculator for the lower grades than it is for the upper grades. It has more whatevers in the upper grades. But yeah, on certain items, the calculator will pop up. It's not there all the time. And if on the non-embedded calculator, then the non-embedded calculator, the physical one, can only be used by the student on those items where the other kids have the embedded one showing up. That's how that works. It's not, you can't like say, oh, this kid gets a calculator for everything. That's
accommodation.
look.
Correct?
We'll have to look at Matrix 1. Yeah,
I mean, because some kids get, like, they would get a calculator for the high school exit exam.
but
And that
but-
is their accommodation. And they get it not the first year they take it, but they get it their junior or senior year if they're retaking.
we'll have to look at that. That
Okay.
question is kind of beyond the scope of what I'm going to cover here today. But I'm happy to look at it when you're doing the hands-on. We can look at the matrix, and if anybody else cares about that, we can share it with you. Okay. I don't know if I brought that or not. Well, let me finish this. So the designated supports, then the purple, those are supports that are available to students with educators who are recommending them. So an educator has to recommend the designated support, right? And this would cover a lot of your English learners. So for example, the translations glossary, the translations stack. The ones that are embedded are only available in Spanish. The non-embedded, the glossaries, for example, are available in more languages, in 12 languages. So we could look at the guidelines for the accessibility supports to see which languages. The last one, the green, the accommodations, those are the supports that students have to have an IEP or Section 504 plan. So that has to be written into their plan in order to be selected for the test. Does that make sense? What I wanted to share with you, this is a worry for a lot of people. So look at this. Okay, so Matrix 1 is a publication from the California Department of Education. There was a Matrix 1 for the STAR. Now there's an updated one for the Smarter Balanced Assessments, the CASP. And what that says is that the Part 1, right? Part 1 in the Matrix 1 document covers the embedded supports. So that, did you remember that from the diagram before? Let me go back. So the embedded, see the embedded breaks, then the embedded for all students, and then the embedded. All of those are covered in Part 1 of the matrix. And what it's pointing out is that these supports don't change the construct. So therefore, those results are valid for accountability purposes. Anyway, all of these, what people are worried about is that if they have these, because before, if you pick some of the accommodations, then you got the gift of 200, right? The kids' results didn't count. They will count if you use these things. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that enough of a message for this group? So don't worry. Okay. The ones that don't appear on those lists, if you have any that don't appear on that list, then you have to fill out a form and notify the department that you're doing it. And then in the last part of the Matrix 1 document lists the ones that the department knows that people are going to do. And they know those are going to affect the validity of the test. So how many people here give a rip about what I just was talking about? Oh, good. Okay, that's great. At least enough of you. So I would urge you to download Matrix 1, right, from the CDE website and take a look at what's in there. So this is the implementation of the designated supports and accommodations. This is the process that ideally would be set up. So we start in the middle, up above our beautiful young lady's head, identifying the student needs. So that can happen with the teacher, with the student, the parent, right? I'm talking about designated supports in particular now, where they have to be identified by an educator, recommended by an educator, and then the matching needs to available supports. That's teachers knowing enough about the supports to be able to match what's in the computer to what the kid needs, using those supports, so that would be using the practice test, then evaluating how effective those supports are. For example, say I need color contrast, I've got a visual issue. There are 4 different kinds inside of the testing environment. You can do magenta on black, or blue on yellow, gray on gray. So you would want to test and see which of those, right, is going to be most effective for me as I take that test. And then finalizing those support selections by entering them into TOMS. And then you can test them out again on the practice test. We can use the practice test 2 different ways this year. The kids can log on to as a guest, and they can actually change the settings. They can turn the masking on and off, see how it works, color contrast. Once you enter the test settings into TOMS, then, once you enter the test settings, or somebody enters the test settings into TOMS, then if the student logs on to the practice test, they can log on using their SSID number and their name this year, so it really replicates what it's like to start that, and the teacher can actually start the test setting so they can practice doing that, which is great. And the kid will also see the supports. Yes?
Is there a limit of the number of times kids can do that?
With the practice test?
Yeah.
No, unlimited. No, it's there to practice those things. Yeah, it is. So you can identify whether those supports are in there and working, which is good. You can also do that with the interim assessments. Then you would make any final adjustments in TOMS, and then you're ready to go for the summative assessment. So, any questions about this before I move on? Okay. So the last thing with relation to the summative assessment that I wanted to share with you is just the need, and this may not be your responsibility, but maybe you could bump it up to, you know, your principals and superintendents, whoever is going out and talking to the community, but also get it down to the teachers. It's going to be really important for us to get out in front of the results that are coming back, right? Yes, thank you. Because it's different, right? They're new standards, it's a new assessment, it's a new baseline, and a lot of parents, they're going to be, it's really funny, one person, I don't know if any of you listened to the state board meeting last month, but the student representative, he said, I would really encourage you to make the report that is designed for the Smarter Balanced assessments different from the parent report that went home for the CSTs. He said, because otherwise parents are going to be taking out that old report, they're going to look at the new report, they're going to compare them with each other, right? So I think he's absolutely right about that. So these things are the FAQs, and I put a link in here, this is on the department web pages. They're paragraphs. What are these assessments? How do they help improve teaching and learning? How is it different? So it just very simply answers some of these questions, and it's intended to be language that you can plug into letters or use as elevator, elevator speeches, we call them at West Ed. Just, some quick and dirty language that you can use to help people understand this is new, and legally you can't compare the results from one system to another. I mean, you can't, you're not allowed to, and it would be silly. They're so different from each other that there's no point. But we need to get that message out and keep saying it, right? The Harvard Business Review in the early 80s, there was this great article that said leadership is writing your message in the snow, and it's snowing, right? So the message is you have to say it over and over and over and over before people really get that. So the first one is the FAQs. The second one is a shorter bit of language. They're aligned with each other. That was a letter that went to your superintendent about 3 weeks ago. And then there's also for high schools, there's a letter of support from the Institutes of Higher Ed, just for your parents who are concerned about the colleges. Every single college system, they participated in this letter in support of the Common Core and the new system. Then the second to last, the academic checkup, that's a little video that they're comparing the new assessments to physicals that your kids get every year. So the message is really, you wouldn't raise a student, a kid, right, from age 0 to 12 without having their medical needs, assessed every year. So why would you educate them without doing the same thing? So it's really just kind of a logical, this is the smart thing to do. It's just an academic checkup. Don't stress. And it's a drawing. It's like that UPS commercial where the guy from years ago, where the guy was drawing, blah, blah, blah. So it's done in that style, and it's not very long. The last one is really, I think, really good for parents, but really good for parents. And what that is it's only for elementary grades, but they are videos of real kids that show what the Common Core looks like in classrooms, right? And so these are all just anxiety reducing mechanisms, so I would urge you to take advantage of some of these. So I'm going to stop here for about 5 minutes and let you just talk to each other about this, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about interims. Okay?